Hey traders, welcome back to the FXE YouTube channel. What a remarkable Monday. My weekend analysis mostly played out in a single day. And after that incredible price action, I wanted to come back and do a quick update. So starting with DXY, as I was guessing, the downside targets were in fact met and DXY has pushed up higher, creating a higher high. The first buy side target is just above the current price and the second one is not far above that. What I'm thinking on the higher time frames is that a break of either of those levels will bring DXY into the fair value gap, and I think it is very likely that we'll start to see a reaction from one of them. So what I'm thinking is from here either we come above this liquidity target and start to see, well, let's just say a shift. And then a push down, or above this liquidity target. So I'm thinking either news this week will bring DXY to those levels, and if we reach those levels prior to news, I'm guessing we'll already start to have a pullback, and then potentially the news can drive price down. That's what I'm thinking for now, at least. So that was a weekly time frame. Let's have a quick look at the daily. So if you look at the daily, you can clearly see, so as I mentioned before, we hit our downside targets. We had a huge reaction off of it. I was expecting price to come a little lower for a pullback, and you'll see that on the lower time frames. But instead of going to the level I was expecting, it massively pushed up after London Open. What else can I say? But you can see how strong that bullish candle was. If we go on the 15-minute time frame, so I left those levels there so that you could see where I was expecting price to go to. So here you can see the fair value gap that I was expecting price to come to. Didn't come to that level. Instead, it swept liquidity, and after London Open, started to drive to the upside. So I was right that downside targets were met. I just didn't get this right. I really wanted to see price to come a little lower for price to drive higher. And honestly, I was really reluctant to enter the sells on EU, mainly because this level hadn't been met. So right now, DXY continues to be extremely strong. Although there are inefficiencies left behind on this drive up, I'm not sure it's going to go back for them now. It could, and then continue to the upside. But my plan, at least for now, is to cautiously watch how DXY moves. If we get a pullback today, then I'll start looking for sell setups on EU. And if it just continues to the upside, I'll wait for those draws on liquidity to be hit, and then look for long setups on EU after, assuming we get the expected reaction. The main thing that concerns me though about any analysis is the fact that we still have a lot of big events this week that could potentially screw up any forecasting that's done at this point. As I mentioned in the weekend video, we still have Jolt's job opening later today during New York session. We have services PMI for the Eurozone tomorrow during the London session, and then services PMI for the US during the New York session. Then on Thursday, we have jobless claims for the US, and don't forget we have NFP on Friday. So there is a lot of heavy news this week And that's why I'm worried that analysis may not play out as expected. Now, if we look at EU, so you can see that the sell side target has been reached. We still have the weekly fair value gap below, but I'm not sure if we're going to see that, see price get there before we have a pullback. I'm thinking that now that the sell side targets have been reached and we're getting close to the buy side targets on DXY, I'm guessing that we'll probably have a pullback, like a significant pullback, before we have the continuation pushing down to that fair value gap. But my thoughts for now, at least, are that now that the sell side targets have been hit, we could see a reaction at any time now. But as I mentioned for DXY, I would really like to see DXY reach for its buy side targets before I start looking for any longs or long setups on EU. Now if we go to the daily time frame, so you can see that was a massive bearish candle that was printed. And keep in mind that it's only Monday. The sell side target has been reached. A lot of inefficiency was left behind, so I wouldn't be surprised if we do have a pullback to fill in some of that inefficiency before it continues down in order for DXY to hit its buy side targets. And then if we look at the hourly, so the chart starts to get a little messy. So yeah, you can see we started the day with some strength on EU, had a pullback prior to the Europe session, and then we had a massive push up during Frankfurt Open. It swept all of this internal liquidity, but what it in fact did is created equal highs, and that was the main reason. Well, not the main reason, it was one of the big reasons, aside from DXY not reaching its lower targets, that I was really reluctant to enter a sell here. But seeing the reaction off the supply, I entered the trade anyways. I thought at worst it was going to be a break even, but fortunately it did play out. So as you can see, price drove down after London and continued to push down the entire day. This right here, where we have that huge wick, this is the manufacturing PMI. So when that was released, we initially pushed down and then had a push up to sweep liquidity, and thereafter continuation to the downside, ultimately hitting our sell side targets. And you can see we've left behind some inefficiencies. So these are 4-hour fair value gaps. There are some breaker gaps, breaker blocks as well. So if we do get a pullback today, I would like to see one of these areas be targeted. And as I was saying with DXY, if we do get a pullback today, then once we're in one of these POIs and have a sell setup, then I'll look for sells. If it continues to the downside, then I'll just focus purely on DXY to see if it reaches its buy side targets. So now let's go down to the lower time frames and I'll show you the trades that I took. Okay, so as I mentioned, I did have these paths here for my weekend analysis. So if we push to the upside, I was looking at this supply zone as the area that we saw the reaction, or this supply zone as an area where we saw a reaction. So prior to Europe session, Frankfurt manipulated the price, pushed up significantly, and then after London opened, we started to have a shift. So we started to see some signs of weakness, and then when we had that pullback, I was just watching to see if the supply was respected or not. And when I saw price starting to come down, I just put a sell stop at the bottom of the 15-minute supply, covering the entire 15-minute supply. And to be completely honest, like I said before, I wasn't confident with this trade, knowing that DXY didn't hit the downside targets that I was thinking it may go to, and the fact that we created equal highs here. So I was thinking at one point or another, I was thinking that I could get into this trade, and worst case scenario, it would be a break even. I figured it would push down to show more signs of weakness, and then potentially come back up higher, sweeping liquidity, and then come down. But I was already in the trade anyways, and I was just watching to see what happens. And to be honest, once this low broke, I was quite amazed. I didn't think that it would give that confirmation without coming back for this liquidity. And then if we look at the next trade that I took, so this one was a little more riskier. So what had happened at this time, you can see we're just pushing down lower and lower throughout the entire day. Even after New York Open, we continued to push lower and lower. And then what happened when we had the manufacturing PMI? So we initially shot down. So when we shot down, I was looking at this as EU showing the intended direction that it wanted to go. And then when it pushed up after, I was just looking at this as manipulation. And sure enough, you can see that it did take out this high right here, which was probably what it was seeking, to take out any late sellers in the market. And when I saw the price come and take that high out and starting to push right back down, I just set a sell stop. And then it just eventually came back down, tagged me into the trade, and you can see after I got tagged into the trade, it never came back. There was a small pullback right here, but even if my break even was already set, it wouldn't have taken me out of the trade. And ultimately it continued down, created a lower low, and at that point I was pretty confident that I was safe and that this trade was eventually gonna hit my sell side target. And then on the next trade I took, the reason why I took this is we had this massive push down, and when I saw the pullback, I was just looking at this as EU coming back to fill inefficiency. It did play around for a few minutes, and then we started to show some signs of weakness here, and then when it pulled back again, once again I set a sell stop. Price eventually did come down. It hit my 1R TP, so I partialed some on this trade, but ultimately it came back, took me out break even. The high actually held, and when we started to play around here showing some signs of weakness, on one of the pullbacks that I saw, I actually entered with a better entry. I think it was maybe 1 pip higher than this entry, and as you can see, my stop loss was also smaller. So I had a better risk to reward on this trade, and when it pushed down, eventually it broke the lows. It did have one pullback, and to be honest, I wasn't really even looking at the charts at this point, but ultimately it did hit my the sell side target, which was my final TP. And quickly, just to mention, normally I don't trade so aggressively. I do scale in from time to time, but I don't try to scale in like this much in general. But when I was seeing the price pushing down and knowing where it was likely to go, every time I saw a pullback at a relevant level, it made sense to scale in. So I did. Anyways, let's just go back to the analysis and try to sum up this video. So all this stuff I can remove now. Let's have a look at the hourly time frame. Sorry about that. That was my alarm going off 1 hour before Japan Open. Normally when I wake up, but so I was off and on watching the charts all night. I haven't slept yet. So anyways, let's focus purely on DXY. So as I mentioned before, we do have inefficiencies left behind. So if we do go and target those inefficiencies, then I'll be looking for sell setups on EU. And then if we don't go back for those inefficiencies and just continue to the upside, let me just remove that. That's not necessary anymore. I will just be looking for price to come and sweep the buy side liquidity, come into the weekly fair value gap, and from there look for buy setups on EU. So if not here, then here. So these are the two levels I'll be monitoring that I would like to see DXY reach for before looking for any buys on EU. And if DXY does come back for a pullback, then I will look for sell setups on EU. And just a reminder, with all the news that we have, really anything can happen. I'm just hoping that the higher time frame intention paves the path for the news to drive price in the intended direction. But anyways, that's it for me. I hope you guys found value in this video, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace. Hey, you made it to the very end. Thanks for that. If you could do me one more favor and click the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, it'll allow the YouTube algos to kick in and help this channel grow. Thanks again. Cheers.